All right, our next speaker is Jack Churchward. Now, those of you here, I always say they're into metaphysics. My daughter said they wouldn't be here if they weren't into metaphysics. Those of you who have been in metaphysics for a long time should know the name Churchward. James Churchward. How many of you remember his work? He's a pioneer, he's the forefather, he's the foundation of all the information of Lemuria, which he called the land of Mu. And he went back in the 1920s, and Jack's going to be telling a lot of the story. Back in the 1920s, James Churchward wrote a whole series of books on the land of Mu, about the continent in the Pacific. And as far as we know, Lemuria preceded Atlantis. Lemuria was in the Pacific Ocean,
turn it back on.
A huge continent, and the Atlantis was in the Atlantic Ocean. Well, James Churchward found this information. You're going to be going into more details, but is it okay if I say a little bit? He went to Tibet and found ancient tablets and scrolls in the monasteries and translated all these things. I said he preceded Zecharia Sitchin in going and finding unknown information and getting it out. So he was much, much older in doing this, and he found the information in many other places also besides that. But in his day, he was ridiculed. The scientists made fun of him. What do you mean there was a continent out here in the middle of the Pacific? Nobody believed him, and this held on for a long time, even into your time, where nobody would believe him. But now we know, in metaphysics, it's a fact, there was a continent out there. So James Churchward is the forefather, pioneer of all the work that was ever done on Lemuria, the land of Mu. And this is his great-grandson. This is Jack Churchward. And he has brought back, he's an engineer, but he has brought back his great-grandfather's work. And we put it out again, and he has added his own research to the grandfather's work. And so it's more information in that. But something else I was going to say. I was surprised that this is the exact copy of the original books, and it has the photographs in there that his great-grandfather did on his research. It's all in here. It's called Lifting the Veil on the Lost Continent of Mu. Now, one thing you should know, there's a lot of copycats on the internet, and the computers are saying they are putting out the work of James Churchward. They do not have permission to do this. Jack is the only one that has the copyrights, but many of them on the internet are using the same material. So you ought to know that. That's one thing wrong with the internet. People do tend to steal material, put it on as their own. But he is the original. This is a Jack Churchward. It's a great honor to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dolores. Good afternoon. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about my book, Lifting the Veil on the Lost Continent of Mu, Motherland of Men. When Dolores mentioned that she wanted me to come and speak, I obviously wasn't thinking of this when I said yes, but I'm going to expand my horizons and we'll jump right in. First of all, this will be the only engineering slide, or engineering-like slide. I want to set an agenda so that everybody can understand where we're going. First of all, I want to present my understanding of James and discuss whether or not he's relevant today. Some of my family background, some of James' theories, and James' influences. Also, I would like to present some motivations and stirring currents that provide my background, and then I'd like to discuss lifting the veil on the lost continent of Mu, motherland of men, and how it is the definitive edition of the book, of the 1926 book, and how it opens new avenues of research. So I'd like to discuss our Churchward family background. In the Stoke Gabriel Parish records, the first record is of William Churchward, born in April 1529, and his father was Gabriel. The family property since the 1440s has been Hill House in Stoke Gabriel. It was the oldest private residence in Britain until it was sold in the 1920s. There is a reference to it. It is the first place in Britain that tobacco was consumed. Sir Walter Raleigh's first mate was John Churchward, and they stopped at the family house and partook of the weed that came from the New World. Unfortunately, it was ended a little prematurely when a servant saw the smoke and came running in with a bucket to put out the fire. The quote, we Churchwards have always been yeoman farmers, no heraldry or no royalty in our family. The motto for the symbols, the heraldry symbol there means gentle in manner. Most of us are kind of quiet, at least I am, and it's no longer applicable to the Churchward family. The person that it was given to has since passed away without issue. So if I could go on a little bit about James. He was born in 1851 and died in 1936. He was born in Bridestow, Devon, in what they called at the time Stone House. Must have been the only stone house in Bridestow at the time. He's one of 5 boys and four girls. His younger brother was Albert Churchward. He was, some people may be familiar with his works in books on Freemasonry. And until 10, he lived near Dartmoor, and that is a place where there's many megaliths and some strange rock formations that are very old. He also wrote that he attended school in Torquay, which is some miles to the east of Stoke Gabriel, and subsequently he lived in Oakhampton and later in London. In 1871, he married Lady Mary Julia Stephenson, picture of her here. They owned tea plantations in Ceylon. Unfortunately, during one of the Indian uprisings, her father was killed, and she was raised by the royal household back in Britain. My grandfather, James Alexander, was born in Ceylon in Colombo in September of 1872. James' Pacific Region's explorations and travels began in 1879. And the reason I mention William Brown Churchward is that he is mentioned in some of James' correspondence as Uncle Willie. And Uncle Willie was the consulate of the Samoan people. He also wrote a couple books on my consulate in Samoa and blackbirding in the Pacific. First White Man on the Beach is what it was called. In the late 1880s and 90s, James interacted with the La Plongeons in New York. He also interacted with many people at the Griffith household, Percy Tate Griffith being his biographer. He was an engineer. He had 31 patents. And in 1911, he sued for $6 million for patent infringement. And in 1914, he was awarded that money. And he moved to Lakeville, Connecticut, bought himself a large estate, and continued his research. James was an avid sportsman, hunter, fisherman, and he wrote articles. Some of that is covered on my website in blogs, and also complete copies of his works. Of articles and pamphlets, not his books. We don't have those online. He did appear early times on WNYC, 1924 to 1925. One of the titles I'm aware of and I found most peculiar was Hunting Pygmies in Central America. James' first book was written in 1926. It was called The Lost Continent of Mu, Motherland of Men. In 1927, he wrote a book on Niven's discoveries. Unfortunately, I can't pronounce the name. But it's copies of stone tablets from, and it begins with an A, and it's really long and very difficult to pronounce. In 1931, he re-released Lost Continent of Mu and The Children of Mu. Sacred Symbols of Mu was followed in 1932, The Cosmic Forces of Mu in 1934, and the second book of The Cosmic Forces of Mu in 1935. James moved to Los Angeles in December 1935 rather, and in January 1936 he was found dead in his hotel room. He is now buried in Valhalla, New York, in Kensico.